In the old guidebook of the delicate television signal transmission, you will be familiar with the words, "Do not adjust your sets." And so yes, do not adjust your sets. The show is just beginning. And no, not News Gang. Well, it will, but another one is on. It is the impeachment show currently showing on a screen near you, and the preliminaries are indeed packed with preliminaries, which could lead to more preliminaries that will then graduate to further preliminaries. So at this stage, it is the bar versus the bench. And the scorelines, as at this hour, the bench 1, the bar 0. More updates later. Meantime, impeached Deputy President left the hospital with guns blazing and in a car that was uncharacteristically small, and a convoy that, well, did not exist. And Gachagua is angry and saying a few things about his boss. Elsewhere, there is a rapture from the pulpit as religio-political allies deliver fire and brimstone at, well, what was once a most unlikely target. The holy firefight meets the impeachment roadshow on the News Gang. On the final words, the memo, the sense, the kicker, and my take a recusal this week to allow the other recusal proceedings to conclude. The final words are back next week. But the News Gang is here. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Before we begin, I'd like us to deal with some preliminaries, and get that out of the way and deal with those. First things first, we saw the former President Uhuru Kenyatta, after what was rather some time, a moment of absence, a couple of months maybe?
Yes, indeed, and these are the images that were shared earlier today by his communications team. Kanza Dena specifically, the spokesperson for the fourth president, shared these images, indicating that the former president is currently in Cote d'Ivoire for a meeting. And these are the first images of the former president to have been shared in public for quite a couple of months, that have been characterized by some speculations about his whereabouts. So this comes as a relief, especially considering the nature of some of those rumors that were being bandied around about the fourth president. There he is. He is in Ivory Coast.
Right, and if you look at the post on X, which talks about that he's just arrived to attend the 15th high-level retreat on the promotion of peace, security, and stability in Africa, then saying that the retreat convened by the African Union Commission will focus on the impact and sustainability of AU preventive diplomacy and mediation in addressing conflicts across the continent. Of course, quite an event that he's just about to attend. But also it's coming after, it's been a while. Remember one of the letters, and we were discussing this earlier on, the statement that he issued on the 25th of June, just after the breach of Parliament. And that evening, when everyone was looking forward to hearing from the president, that is William Ruto, and he had just issued a statement at State House, and then Uhuru Kenyatta released a statement that also to media houses, and also posted on his X, which was talking about the essence of people speaking with each other, of how Kenya is bigger than one of us. And I think that was probably the last statement you ever heard of him expressing himself on matters of the nation. But since that time, so much has happened, from, of course, the protests that were, the breach of Parliament on that particular day, dismissal of cabinet, broad-based arrangement that also included members of the Azimio coalition, which of course he is the chairperson of the, what do you call it? The council, Azimio Council. Yeah. And you recall that a lot of words were put in his way. Raila Odinga saying that actually he consulted with Uhuru Kenyatta, who asked him to call William Ruto, and William Ruto called him. Then after that, you heard of the narration or the narrative by impeached Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, him saying that they are now friends, they have made up with the former president, and he remains the kingpin of the Mount Kenya region. So for the country to see him in those photos after so much has gone on, I cannot imagine the questions that Kenyans would have. Yeah,
the last time we saw pictures of him being put out was actually June the 14th. And you note with all of the statements regarding local matters, we get a statement. But where we get pictures of him actually in action, the last one was on the 14th of June.
Right.
Actually, prior to the protests, and that time he was in Nigeria for the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation Democracy Dialogue, speaking about education being the key to Africa's prosperity. So that was the last time we saw him speak, and you saw him pictures of him from 14th of June to now today. The 24th of October. So, I just note that we see pictures of him when he's doing, out doing, regional tours and, speaking at regional or international events. Right. But anytime it's got to do with anything local, you would see a statement. But perhaps, as it should be, you've been president, you've had your time, and even then, perhaps only speaking particularly about local matters, during extraordinary times. And, June 25th was certainly one of those. Yeah. So there we are. We'll see when the next sighting will be of the fourth president of the Republic of Kenya. Well, probably a statement, because, at this event, you'd expect that he would say a few things. Let's wait and see if we'll hear voices from that side. That's right. Okay. Now, speaking of local issues, the current administration has quite a lot to deal with, and what a week, 2 weeks literally it has been. All our eyes have been trained. First of all, we were eyes peeled on Parliament. Now it is shifted to the courts, and we've seen quite some dramatic showdowns there. Arguments for and against on either side of the divide of this matter of the impeachment of Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. I want us to first just listen to all of these lawyers. How many lawyers do we have in the court, at any one given time for a court, in total? But all of them, the big boys, so to speak, and those who sort of were taught by some of the big boys, here is one of those, debates or showdowns, if you like, that we witnessed.
Maybe I can assist Dr. Kaminwa.
With respect, will you sit down? Kaminwa is talking. Will you sit down?
Under the rules of this court, senior counsel has preference, speaks first before any other person except the Attorney General. So if you would please sit down. I, as senior counsel...
I will not sit down. We are practicing what are doing breastfeeding.
That is also true. So, my lord, I wanted to suggest... My lord, I wanted to suggest...
Excuse me. Dr. Kamuna, finish what we are saying.
What I'm saying to you, my lord, we need a healing process, and this court is going to provide that healing process. Let the lawyers say what they want to say. What are we hurrying for? Let us not have some people calling themselves professor or senior counsel, titles that don't mean anything at all when it comes to this.
I think they mean something, Dr. Kamina. They do mean something.
Something means something when it is you and you approve it. My lord, all that I'm saying to you, let people talk. Let people address you.
Okay, people will talk.
When the country is burning.
Dr. Kamino, you have made your point, please.
Yes, thank you very much.
You have made your point.
The three-judge bench certainly has its work cut out for it. Look, what a day. So first of all, I think we need to do a head count of just how many lawyers are in court every day for this case in total on either side. I mean, I think to the extent that, the case on...
The Adani matter.
The Adani matter, was what's the word, adjourned.
Yeah.
Because all of the lawyers who are dealing with that were, in this court. But what a showdown. Like, whichever side of this perhaps one is on, this is such, sort of a masterclass in how people debate and present their differing points of view. I think it's fascinating to watch. But look at that. Some of it may be, ageism, reverse ageism. Linus, what are your thoughts on everything we've seen so far?
Nothing surprising considering the magnitude of the issue at hand. This is the first time in the history of the country, and this is the first time in the experience of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, that a deputy president is being impeached. Not just impeached, but in the full manner of having him removed from office. And this has now turned into a legal battle. Remember, the political process took place in the Houses of Parliament, starting with the initiation at the National Assembly and then moving on to the Senate, where the Senate confirmed the charges and voted actually for the removal of Rigathi Gachagua as the second deputy president under the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Now, this has turned into another very, very big legal battle. And hasn't it taken the predictable path? It has, in the manner of what we've seen with political battles of this nature. It's almost a reminder of the election petition hearings, which were very, very big legal shows. And looking at this, I think there should be a level of admiration and pride on the part of Kenyans that this is how we do things, that we actually go to a courtroom and argue things out and let judges decide. I'm imagining anywhere else, cross any border, north, south, east. East you'll, yes. Yeah. East you'll end up somewhere. Yeah. Cross anywhere and see how they do it. Yeah. This is not how it's done. Yeah. So this is something we should actually be proud of. It's a measure in civility. We pass it. We pass the test. That, we'll haggle for days, and lawyers will be out there. The advocates will be arguing for days, for as long as the legal process will actually take. And this is something to be proud about. And look, Yvonne and Sam, when you look at someone like Dr. John Haminwa, who is in his 80s, mid to late 80s. I haven't checked his actual age, but I know he's an octogenarian. He's still there, totally lucid, making some of the most powerful contributions, and sounding, like a voice that is necessary in that courtroom. He uses also his age and experience quite well. He deploys it. And no one knows that better tonight than Professor Githu Muigai, senior counsel, who was told about his senior counsel. And he was reminded a few things about the chronological order of things. This is a good show. Yeah. I don't think there is anything negative about this. I've seen some arguments about a vacuum, constitutional crisis. Which crisis? This is absolutely no crisis. Let the show play out, argue it out, and let the court tell us. And this is my last point on this issue. When you look at our political space and the political culture of the country, it's very much in need of a referee, in need of an adult. I think we said this last time. And in other countries, in a country like Egypt, which tried democratic rule through the election of Mohamed Morsi, it took a year, and the military was back to shepherd things back in good direction. Yeah. In our country, honestly, increasingly, an assertive judiciary that is driven by reason and courage is actually playing the role of umpire. Yeah. And there's something these politicians will keep arguing about, we have a crisis, we need this office. Yes, you do. But how are you handling those offices? The politicians, the legislative and the executive, right now should not, they can't hold a candle against the judiciary, because let's measure them by your performance. I mean, if you look at an institution like IEBC, that the legislature is supposed to ensure its existence, the executive is supposed to ensure its existence, it's not in existence because of political indiscipline. So, working under close supervision, and this is kudos to the judiciary. I think this case is going to be very interesting to watch, and let's hope that they play the judicial way and less the political way. Yeah.
Before you come in, Sam, I just want us to get another illustration of how this debate happens. What I like about a courtroom setting is somebody can tell you off and sometimes put you down without using the usual words that we're used to. Let's listen to another one. This is Elisha Ngoya versus Professor Tamojenda.
They normally leave court. They may leave. They left Senate. May leave court. We let them say whether they are applying for adjournment.
Is that remark? They normally leave court. Whether they left Senate, my palatable in this court, my lord. I need that.
No, because this is an adjournment.
No, is that remark palatable before my lord and my lady? But because we have decorum at the bar. If you have a professor of law misbehaving at the bar, then there's a problem. I'm urging that you direct that remark be withdrawn first, then we make progress. I'm urging, my lord. The remark was made in your presence. I'm urging it be withdrawn first, then I can respond.
My lord, I have no problem with withdrawing the remark, but the point is, it is a veiled application for adjournment, because Mr. Ngoya is saying that the court must address the question of empanelment before the recusal. So why can't he just get to the point?
I am answering the question now, but I know that he has withdrawn. He said he has no problem with withdrawing, but I didn't withdraw. I want him to withdraw first, my lord, because I'm entitled to
Ngoya, I have no problem with withdrawing. You're my friend, but no, I have no problem, my lord. I withdraw the remark, but
Thank you.
There is practice.
Thank you. Let me now address the question.
I mean, you've got to love this spurring back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
Which you do not see in the political sphere. In the political sphere, it's names, insults being hurled, it's epithets everywhere. But look at this here. One argues over process, which do we do first? Another one says, no, we're not going to proceed until you withdraw. I mean, this is beautiful to watch.
No, it is. And of course, I think we were talking about it earlier on, that this is the third day of the court process. Yep. While this in Parliament, the process would have already been concluded.
Yes.
Remember, it took a day to process the impeachment of Rigathi Gachagua at the National Assembly, and a decision was taken. It took exactly 2 days to process Rigathi Gachagua at the Senate, and the process was concluded. Of course, they have timelines and they have the standing orders that they are following. But now, I met someone along the corridors of this place, and they were asking, so how far is Rigathi Gachagua with this particular matter? Which is also important just to bring us to speed. Because you recall that after the decision of the Senate on Thursday night, we were here into Friday morning, and of course, everyone was going to court from the side of Rigathi Gachagua. On the same day, National Assembly was meeting to consider priority business, which also included the transmission of the name of Professor Kithure Kindiki to the House as the nominee for Deputy Presidency. Of course, a lot of issues were raised from that document that the President presented. Then again, on that particular day, there were two orders, court orders from two courts. One in Nairobi by Chacha Mwita, and the other one from Kirugoya by Richard Mwongo, which in effect was sort of giving conservatory orders to the implementation of the orders or the decision of the Senate. But of course, again, there were arguments after that. Some of the lawyers arguing on social media platforms saying that you cannot stay what has already been overtaken by events. But of course, that is the decision of the court to make. As we speak, none of those conservatory orders have been worked on by the courts, because yesterday and the day before, it was the question of, was DCJ in good place legally to impanel the bench led by Justice Eric Ogola for them to hear those particular orders from the Justice Chacha Mwita and Justice Richard Mwongo courts. That was dispensed with yesterday. the court saying that indeed DCJ can actually execute that constitutional administrative function, which is assigned to the Chief Justice, but when the Chief Justice is not able to execute it, the DCJ can do so without offending the Constitution and the law. Then today, of course, has been the hearing of asking these judges to disqualify themselves from hearing this particular matter because of questions of bias, which the applicants themselves, the petitioners from the side of Rigathi Gachagua and others, they are the ones who are making those allegations. Of course, the judges will have the moment because they also listened to the respondents in this particular case. They'll have a moment tomorrow. I think they've said 1 p.m.
Yes. Yeah.
That's when they'll come to give the outcome or the decision based on the presentations before them, submissions before them. And then after that, the court will decide on how to progress with the particular matter. They'll decide whether there are other preliminary issues or they go straight now to hearing the substantive matter, because all this has not started.
Yeah. So, Linus, you know, what you say is absolutely right, Sam. So these are, what is this we're dealing with now? We call these, what, preliminaries? And then, you know, as you answer that, what will be the substantive issues that then the court now decides on this matter? Because if we're dealing with preliminaries, we're dealing now with the recusal of the judges.
Right.
Yes.
But then there's the matter of conservatory orders, which was also supposed to be heard today. But, you know, they didn't get there because they were dealing with the recusal. So still a long way to go.
A very long way to go if you look at the pace of things just in the last 3 days. We've taken, since Tuesday, the court has taken those 3 days to resolve 2 issues. The first one, as explained by Sam, is the issue of the empanelment, which was settled yesterday. And then another one now started, which is the question of recusal. And they are preliminary issues. We are far from getting to the substance of the questions that the court has to decide. And let's remember that the question that the court will determine is the impeachment question, whether Rigathi Gachagua was properly impeached or properly voted out of office by the Senate. So that is still far off the line. But tomorrow is going to be a very telling day when the judges make that decision on whether to recuse themselves or not. If, for example, they say they're staying, then they'll have to on their own motion, give directions on the next steps to try and move the parties get down to the issues and get them determined. So one thing that this week has told us is, as part of their rights in the adversarial system that we operate in the country, even buying time is part of a legitimate tactic. Yeah. And that is what you are seeing happening. Delay the swearing in of Professor Kindiki as the Deputy President designate. And what that in effect means is you can argue that Rigathi Gachagua is still in office. And those are the games you're going to see, especially in the preliminary stages, until the substantive issue of the impeachment is reached.
Yeah, so I want us to, we'll now move to what's happening outside the courts. But just my last comment on this one is, the 2010 Constitution has been, a beautiful document to see it in action. I think more than any other country on the continent. We had our first election under this Constitution in 2013. When some people were not pleased with the outcome, they went to the Supreme Court and challenged the election of then President Uhuru Kenyatta. They decided the way that they did. We're back to the courts again in 2017 when history was made, not just in the country, but in the region and on the continent as well. We know the outcome of the 2017 one. Again in 2022, when some felt displeased with the outcome of that. There is so many ways in which we are stretching and finding out the limits of the Constitution, and it can only get better from here, where we start to actually see testing it. And you remember these were the conversations that were being had in the country during the BBI. The attempt to, amend the Constitution was First of all, have we tried it out enough to see what works and what doesn't? There was conversation about, have we audited the Constitution to see which parts of it are working? But there have been many attempts to do that, I think, since 2013, in terms of just seeing, what are the limits, what works, what doesn't. Maybe there were certain aspects of the Constitution that we passed, and, it's sort of like when you move into a new house, maybe the piping doesn't quite work, as you intended, the light fixtures aren't working. And I think that's what's beautiful about the moment that we find ourselves in. For all intents and purposes, we're impeaching a deputy president for the first time. How does that work in practice rather than in theory? How does that work based on maybe a cabinet secretary, maybe a president, maybe all of these other things? Was the intention met with what realities that we have to face? Political realities, economic, and all of these others. And so, whatever comes out of the courts, I think, will be fascinating to see as we understand and put this Constitution to practice. But, when we're doing that, we have to remember we are political beings, and that's exactly what's happening outside of the courts. So while things are happening at the court, there are other very, serious political ongoings behind the scenes, maybe not so much behind the scenes, perhaps more unearthing things from behind the scenes, allegations of that. Let's listen to the deputy president who fell ill in court last week, was hospitalized for the weekend, came out of hospital to say this.
Undercover security agents entered my room in Kisumu and bagged it, and one of them tried to poison my food. In Nyeri, another team from the National Intelligence Service came to Nyeri and tried to poison food that was meant for me and Kikuyu Council of Elders.
Perhaps let's listen to that with the one that follows, about where, the impeached deputy president actually makes a very audacious claim that his life is not in danger, and he places the responsibility of that squarely on his current or former boss, considering he's impeached. Let's watch.
And if anything happens to me or my family, President William Ruto must be held to account. Do whatever you want, but let me live. Let me look after my children. You can do whatever you want with the country, but allow me to live.
How bold is that?
I mean, it was quite something. And watching him on Sunday afternoon, I think it was about an hour after President William Ruto had finished to address the country on the event of Mashujaa Day. And excuse me, it reminded me of the events of June 26th.
Yes.
When President William Ruto came out to address the country on the question of the Finance Bill 2024 and how he was going to reject it. And on the same afternoon, we had a press invite that the deputy president was going to address the country from Mombasa, and went ahead to speak about the National Intelligence Service, which effectively became one of the grounds of impeachment. And you can imagine how significant that statement by the deputy president was in terms of what Kenyans from then on were talking about. If you look at the news media, if you look at the newspapers the following day, the news headlines that were, it was majorly about what Rigathi Gachagua had said. And it gets you to the point of thinking, if indeed these things were happening, how bad has this relationship been the past 2 or so years? Of course, during that interview with Citizen TV, he said that it was only good for the first 1 year, but after that, things started going south. But it looks like it's been going south for longer than that, to an extent that he actually can come out and claim that he feels his life is under threat, for him to say there has been assassination attempts, that there has been bagging of his room while in
and for him to put it squarely on.
Exactly.
He's not just saying it's anyone.
Exactly. I mean, it's quite significant, and you wonder just how much more does he know? And it makes you remember. I asked him a question. How is your relationship with the president? And he said, my relationship with the president is very good. I asked him, what does that mean? And of course, everything else he said after that would actually tell you that
it wasn't.
It was everything but good, to an extent of him saying that now revealing of the challenges that he had been experiencing and how the president needed to put his house in order, his cabinet in order, his party in order. This really said a lot of things. But of course, that time that he was speaking on Sunday, this was a person that had been removed from office by impeachment and, of course, was now gearing towards now looking for justice at the courts.
Yeah, and, you know, very dramatic. I think in terms of how things have, probably they escalated much faster, and, you know, so whatever it is, you know, his claims, we cannot sit here and verify and say, right. You know, speak to their veracity or not. But for such bold statements to be made, how quickly would things have had to deteriorate between these two individuals? You know, from August 2022, I mean, he was picked as the running mate, just, you know, what, less than 3 months to the election?
Yes, it was in May.
So that's assuming that by then now, that's when they started to really work together in tandem, knowing or hoping that they were going to win, and then they win. But surely, you know, it moves from being removed from a WhatsApp group in the conversation he had with you
right.
in less than a month to my life is in danger, and if something happens to me, it's the president who's responsible. Like, what's our political scene like in this country, Linus? This is too fast. Or is it?
Well, not at all. I mean, if you look at this, it's the same show running, only different episodes, because we've been here before, not too long ago, with President Uhuru Kenyatta and now, and then Deputy President at the time, William Ruto.
But it wasn't this bad. Then it was, ukiona yule anatangatanga, unajua, now it's...
Not really. Remember, at some point also, President Ruto, Deputy President Ruto at the time said, don't kill my children.
Oh, yeah.
They all, and somehow, and these three really interesting people, the children seem to be part of the equation. And the truth is, we do not know what exactly went wrong between William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua. We also do not know, to the finest of the points, what went wrong between former President Uhuru Kenyatta and then his then Deputy President William Ruto. But here are the deductions that we can make. And one of them is they have given the Constitution of Kenya 2010 a really bad start when it comes to the management of the affairs of the executive. They've come across as, and really I'm putting them in the same bag, because they've come across as trying to live in the past and under a new constitution. I think last week I said here that William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua are behaving for most of the first year as if they had won the 1988 election, which is KANU is in town, and this is how we're going to proceed. I think the political class in this country is yet to transition. The political class in this country, especially those in the executive, is yet to appreciate the spirit of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. The spirit of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 is one that presumes civility, maturity, absence of the kind of primitive treatment they subject each other to. Look at what has happened to Rigathi Gachagua in the last week. His security is withdrawn. Flashback to the Deputy President William Ruto. His security was withdrawn, and the GSU numbers were...
It's reorganization of...
Oh,
that's what they call it, every time.
Yes. and this is the typically Kenyan political way of very primitively interpreting political power. And, you know, it cascaded even down to regular civilians. Haven't you heard of civilians who will be denied certain things just because...
Maisha mbaya, siasa mbaya.
Right? Yes.
Yeah.
And,
siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya.
Yeah, there's some, you know, whose firearm licenses have been cancelled.
Yeah.
You know, this is really primitive interpretation of political power. And it's very 60s and 70s and a bit of 80s. It's not what it should be right now. Which is why this show, compare what is going on in the executive and the conversation that the judiciary in court is having. Even those lawyers, and Kiba Mungai today made a funny remark that, they are, each advocate is in that courtroom to represent on the instructions of their clients, and they are free to present sense or nonsense.
Yes.
And really, it's a good point, because a lot of the latter can come from the political scene as legal instruction to a counsel to present in court. And they are not doing well. And for me, I look at the totality of the picture. When you look at what is happening, you see the judiciary has really grown and has really progressed the country and the spirit of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Whereas the executive and its poodle called the legislature have really remained, very 80s. Parliament, you saw last week, and you just need to compare the two hearings. Same lawyers.
Yes.
And wasn't Elisha Ongoya having a better conversation today compared to the conversation he was having in the Senate a week ago? That tells you, these are, they keep invoking this equality of arms, but these arms should also invest in some hard work. Judiciary is working hard, really, really hard, but is the executive working hard to be the arm, an equal arm of government? Is the legislature working hard enough to be the equal arm of government? There has to be some growth, especially on the executive and the legislature side. And that growth is also expressed in civil ways of dealing with these situations. Because I've seen some arguments saying, impeachment is a political process. Yes, it is. But can you trust the current body of the executive? Can you trust the current body of legislature with guns, let alone an impeachment process? And a number of them have shot people in that house, you know that.
Yep.
And these are the people you're telling, you want to say, no, they can make decisions in the same way judges can. False. That is why we all really, at the end of the day, should report to that judge and ask for their Solomonic moment to tell us, was the impeachment properly carried out by these politicians? Because, they are not, they say they're equal, in spirit largely.
Rather than in practice.
Let's
take a look at a bit of that spirit first, because whilst, as you said, Sam, the deputy president was leaving hospital, spoke after the president had spoken in Kwale during the Mashujaa Day celebrations. I'd like us to listen to that, because there was various interpretations of what he said when he spoke about the country's liberation heroes.
In confronting colonialism, Mekatilili Wamenza did not seek to free her village or region from occupation by a community. Instead, she resisted the structures and institutions of a system of exploitation and tyranny in the knowledge that defeating it would free a whole nation. Any formula seeking to exclude, alienate, or disenfranchise any person, group of community for any reason is repugnant to the very essence of our nationhood.
Now, look, I want us to imagine this conversation outside of the context of present-day circumstances. If this speech had been made last year, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or, depending on, who was in the seat at the time, it would have been hailed as a really, a reminder of our history and from where we've come, and, who are those who are involved in liberating the country from colonialists and how we got here. But these are no ordinary times, Sam. And so there was a lot of interpretation or trying to read between the lines of what he was saying vis-a-vis what's happening in the country at the time.
Right, because you recall that it's not so long ago, it was actually on Thursday last week, that Deputy impeached Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua was accused of sort of alienating other communities in the country, that he was just busy preaching the gospel of Mount Kenya to the exclusion of the rest of the country. Of course, he never got the opportunity to defend himself, but at the National Assembly, you remember him explaining and saying that all that he has been doing, especially the conversation about shares, is about what is contained in the pre-election agreement between or among the parties that have formed the Kenya Kwanza alliance. For William Ruto, the president, to say that Mekatilili Wamenza and freeing her village, well, indeed, he could be right. But the context in which that he was saying this, remember, he had been very quiet since the impeachment motion came on board.
He's not said anything about it.
Exactly. So
from the time there was rumors about it to its execution, absolutely nothing.
So this really must have been targeted to pass a certain message after what the country had witnessed. When he speaks about any formula cannot be implemented if it's going to alienate any person in the country, the proponent of a one man, one shilling resource sharing formula post-2022 election has been Rigathi Gachagua. So really, there is a message that he was passing. And of course, speaking from Kwale, you can obviously see what a platform that would be, because Mekatilili Wamenza came from the region. But also remember, when the former impeached deputy president was talking about the situations that happened to him while in Kisumu, 30th of August. Remember, it was at the homecoming party of Opiyo Wandayi. Yes. I think the previous day they had just during that time they had also witnessed the homecoming party of the CS for National Treasury, John Mbadi. Now, you can imagine the happiness that we saw, the mood of the days at the time, the leaders that were speaking to the people. Remember the president, Rigathi Gachagua himself, telling Opiyo Wandayi that you've become the minister for matters energy. As you connect the country to electricity, begin from home, because Maendeleo starts from home. You remember, everyone was looking happy. Everyone was looking like they're smiling. I remember the leader of majority, Kimani Ichung'wah, was also there and talking about gratitude, that regions need to be grateful.
Son of our soil type of thing.
Exactly. With all that happiness that was seen, the people that were shown that indeed everyone is happy because of the broad-based government, he now alleges that his room was bugged. He now alleges that there was an attempt to poison him. Yeah. On 3rd of September, there was just 3 days, or 4 days if you call it, after that event in Kisumu or in Nyanza. Now he says again there was an attempt to poison his food, and that he had to let the security officers leave. What was going on around that time that it now makes you even think? The statement on the 11th of July, 2024, when the president came to the country and said he has dismissed his cabinet secretaries, and went ahead to say, apart from the prime cabinet secretary, and then said, and of course, the deputy president, who is not affected in any way by this particular decision. It tells you all this has been work in progress that was being worked on, that because now today, when you listen to Rigathi Gachagua saying he's actually putting the impeachment motion at the doorstep of William Ruto. And if you look at even how it was moved in the House, of people talking about the insubordination, remember that ground that was defeated, and people talking about this marriage has reached an...
it's irretrievably broken down.
Correct. So for it to be in such a situation, then you will be right to imagine that the president wanted this process to go through. For him, after the decision of the Senate on Thursday night, the following morning there's a name of a nominee to the office of deputy president. I mean, it's no coincidence. And actually, the clearance had actually been processed with all the agencies, including the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission, IEBC. It tells you something, that there was a lot of work going on. And I also understand that before the motion got to the National Assembly, there have been several meetings. Some of them at night, some of them during the day, strategizing, changing alliances, and saying that they are now shifting their allegiance to someone else who will be pursuing their interests. I remember a meeting in Kiambu of Kimani Ichung'wah and some other members of parliament saying that from now on, they will be following Professor Kithure Kindiki to ensure that their issues are well taken care of, issues of development. Now
that
during
Match as well, to that effect?
Yes. And there was that meeting in Nyahururu of members of parliament from that region saying that from today on, our leader for the region is Kithure Kindiki. So a lot of work had been going on. It is no surprise that we're where we are.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Waswahili husema ukiona vielea jua vimeundwa. I mean, there was, and knowing the president and his personality, if he did not want this to go on, it would not have proceeded beyond an idea. There would never even have been a rumor or a mention of it to begin with, you know, in any public sphere. For me, what is interesting is about, you know, the inner workings, because now, you know, the curtains are being drawn and we're getting a sneak peek into how things work, you know, behind the scenes in the executive. And, you know, there's bound to be a lot of revelations. Now the deputy president says, you know, there's things like Adani and that sort of thing that he doesn't agree with. And he says, you know, he has differed with the president on a number of issues, and that, you know, that is required of a relationship between two people in these offices. But then again, it's something I think we have talked about here on Newsgang for years now. This show has been 6.5 years now, you know, running. And one of the things that comes up is political dishonesty. So there's also the question about, and everybody's telling, you know, the deputy president, speak your mind, tell us what's been happening. But at what point did he have this crisis of conscience and, you know, over certain issues that were being discussed in cabinet meetings? What did he do about it? Well, you know, he says, well, you know, I said this, you know, in this forum. Because we have seen him when times were good between him and the president, praising, you know, government projects and initiatives, telling off those who opposed it, calling them naysayers, for instance, to the affordable housing agenda. So at what point do you do that? And when you have a crisis of conscience, you know, in an institution, in a body, in a unit that you were part of in a big way, formation of it, you know, at the very top level, what do you do about this? You know, to that extent. Do you come out and say anything? And I say this because during the interview that you had with him, he remained completely non-committal on all the other matters that you asked him about. The protests that took place in June, July, the number of people that were killed, he didn't really seem to have much to say about that. When you asked him about, you know, development of the country, the economy, the finance bill, but what he was loud on was the personal injustice and, you know, the personal relationship and how that had broken down. He'd been taken off a WhatsApp group. So he was very vocal about his personal matters, but seemed very, you know, cagey and non-committal on matters of national interest. And that's something I noted and picked up. And then right after all of the problems began, suddenly he was on this media wave. He was at every media house, you know, Kalenjin Media, Meru Media. Not only that, suddenly he became a man of the people. He was seen out at shopping malls and that sort of thing, and interacting with the people. And this is the interesting thing.
And dancing also.
And he was dancing to a song. I wish he knew the lyrics and what they meant. Maybe somebody told him after that. But this is what our politics is like. When things are good for you, personally at least, you're singing the praises of the executive. When they're not, suddenly you are unearthing all of these things. I mean, the deputy president is welcome to tell us about what's been happening there, but he's not the first to tell us that there's issues with Adani. The people had been saying that already. He's not the first to talk about there were scandals. The people had been raising those issues. And in other, you know, jurisdictions, we have seen people who say, I cannot in my conscience continue to work in an environment like this, where in fact my voice is not heard, there is no difference of opinion that is allowed. But suddenly you become the whistleblower, and you know, when things are, the table is turned on you in a very personal way, and that's just, you know, the interesting thing about our politics in the country. So yes, he's probably going to sing like a bird, but to whose benefit? And what is he telling us that we don't already know?
And the reason, Yvonne, is it's a script that works. It's been deployed before and it works very, very well. Because emotion, public emotion is part of the political currency in this country. And you harvest it a lot more easily if you're a victim. Impeached Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is doing exactly the same thing that President William Ruto, as Deputy President, did, to the point of running a campaign as a candidate on the opposite of the government he was deputy of. Yeah. I don't know whether how that sounds, but and he did it so effectively. Yeah. He was seen and he positioned himself as the savior who will save Kenyans from the follies of the government that he was deputy of. And Rigathi Gachagua, while he told Parliament that he's learned from his boss, is playing exactly the same script. And if we audit it right now, let's say, first of all, we confine him to where he identified himself with most, Murima, Mount Kenya. Is his standing there improved from the time all these things began? I think yes. Perhaps, yeah. Because of the victim that he's been, his numbers have gone up. His influence is improving in the region. He's grown faster than he could have grown as a politician in normal times. So this crisis, where there is a victim who will lose his security, lose a bit of the convoy is cut short a bit, end up in hospital. You know, these are things that work so well with the emotion of the public. And let's say something about the public. This public runs a very, very efficient laundry shop. It washes politicians and turns them into new heroes. I was covering the election of 2002 as a reporter, and Mwai Kibaki enjoyed the status of Nelson Mandela, you know, the liberator. Yeah. Kenyans had forgotten that this was the vice chairman and vice president of the Kenya African National Union, the KANU party. And a person, by the way, who said the removal of KANU is equivalent to cutting a mugumo tree with a razor blade. I mean, I don't know how long that will take to cut a mugumo tree with a razor blade.
We need a data point for that.
We would still be doing it now, exactly. 3-4 presidencies down the line. But
did we?
With a razor blade?
Did you cut the tree?
Well, it took Kibaki to come with his own razor blade. It actually cut KANU a lot earlier than it would have taken with a real razor blade.
But I don't think he used a razor blade.
Because after 10 years as vice president of KANU, he became the man that Kenyans turned to liberate them from KANU.
The second liberation, we called it.
Yes, second liberation. Yeah. And it was a very short journey of resigning in December 91 and then going to the election as becoming president. So this laundry shop is still running. That's how the public emotions work. Kenyans will insult you now, and then the next minute they'll be singing praises. And politically, Gachagua has been in a good space with all the problems he's going through. He can go to any place in Mount Kenya right now, and he's a hero of sorts, because the laundry shop forgets immediately, cleans, you know, and gives you a new being. And the new being is Rigathi Gachagua. He's gotten to the peak of Mount Kenya politics faster than it could have taken him if he was in a normal relationship. Sorry to...
that is well understood. It reminds me of an ad of Moshe Moja. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about maybe what's been a Damascus moment within the church. The church is saying some interesting things now about someone who was once the ordained, for whom we could say nothing. Let's take that break. When we come back, it's all about fire and brimstone.